Okay, so going on to our next turn. I've also actually gone and paid for the recording software that I was using, so you will no longer have to be subject to the watermark, and I'm sorry about that. What do we have going on? We have a couple of events. We have a stress epidemic. Look at that poor man. Doctors have warned that businesses are working people too hard, and it is leading to dangerously high levels of stress. I feel you, people. However, I'm not sure that there's a great deal that I can do about that exactly at this moment. We do have some good news. We have a credit rating upgrade. Makes the capitalist happy and slightly increases our GDP. So I'm happy to see that. I take it as a vindication of my policies. We have that budget surplus that we were expecting from introducing the alcohol tax. So that is good. 45% poll reports. Crime is going down a little bit. Poverty is going up a bit. As I said, that was bound to happen from the alcohol tax, but we will just trust that in the long run it will work out. So we have money, and we have the question of how to spend the money. It is important to realize that you always have to be really careful not to get over-enthusiastic about having a budget surplus, because what happens is that the game mechanics simulate boom and bust cycles of the global economy. So even if you don't do anything wrong, the economy will eventually slump down, and that has a whole bunch of ripple effects. If you look at the financial charts, so you can see it's already sort of starting to happen. I mean, it was on an upswing, the global economy, this turquoise line, and it's going to start going down. I can see into the future. And so what's going to happen is these are our sources of income. It's all taxation. And if economic activity slows down, then the tax revenues are going to decrease. So we have to expect that our income is going to go down, and some of these expenses will go up in a down slump. For example, unemployment benefits actually will start costing us more if the economy sucks. And, depending on the interest rate changing, the interest that we are paying on our debt could change. So we always have to be careful about that. For being someone who is fairly far left on social issues, I'm actually, I think, a fairly reasonably sensible person in the fiscal sense. So I'm trying to strike a good balance here. You'll also notice, if you've been paying attention and if you can see through my watermark, that the debt has gone down. It used to be up over 3,000 billion, which is terrifying. The United States starts with a very intimidating amount of debt. So what happens is if you have a surplus at the end of a quarter, you automatically pay down some of your debt. And that's good. I mean, it's definitely nice to see. Some of my other games, I have been able to get countries to a point where they completely eradicated their debt. I don't know that that's ever going to happen with the US because of how much they start with, but at least it's headed in the right direction for now. So we have 25 political capital, and we've made some changes that, we're hoping are going to start paying dividends in terms of improving our situation. Like, we've made some changes to try and improve crime. We can check on the statistics. One of these is violent crime and one is just normal crime. Okay, so the punching is violent crime, and just taking your sack of money with a crowbar is normal crime. I'll have to keep that in mind. And so we still have these problems: antisocial behavior, drug and alcohol abuse, homelessness. They're still driving up crime, but we see that some of the changes, like we just introduced youth club subsidies, and when you hover over it, you can see that currently it's having a negative 1.64% effect. Eventually it's going to be 7%, and then in brackets, this number is the number of turns that it will take before it's at its new level. So that will have something of an impact, and we can see that it's starting to decrease, which is good. And the same thing, hopefully, with, yes, antisocial behavior is starting to tick down as well, so that's good. This red line and this green line, anytime you have one of these, the red and green colored events, there is a start trigger and a stop trigger. And it's interesting, the way that the events work is that the events are hidden. You don't necessarily know what possible events you could be close to triggering. So just as an example, I mean, we had really high alcohol intake, and at some point the alcohol intake became bad enough, and the other factors that cause it, that we reached the magical hidden trigger for antisocial behavior to become a problem. But then once the problem pops into existence, it's not enough to get it down below this initial level where it started. You have to get it down here. So the idea is that it's a lot easier to prevent a problem than it is to eradicate a problem once it's in place. You know, if you had the youth clubs 2 years ago, then the children would never have started lighting cars on fire to amuse themselves. But now that they're doing it, they think it's really fun, and so you're going to have like some pretty serious fucking youth clubs to get them to stop doing that. So prevention is always better. So I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but prevention is always better. And the same thing goes here. We have a technological advantage, and it started when we hit this red line. It's not going to stop until we get down here. So we have a bit of a padding. I mean, it's the opposite for positive events. You can start to suck a little, but until you really start to suck a lot, you hang on to your positive effect. So it's nice. Anyway, so what I was saying is that at this point in time, I've made some of these long-term payoff changes, and I'm not going to see the effect of my educational investment for another couple of years. So we're sort of waiting to see those things start to improve. And in the meantime, I start to get really tempted to change hot button issues, things that don't necessarily have a concrete effect on, you know, the economy, or even affect poverty or any of the major social ills, but just to me are, you know, very important issues. Like, I'd really like to get rid of the death penalty. I mean, I guess we're so generously, we're only killing mass murderers. What else for homicide? So for most crime, yeah, well, at least we're not doing that. But I would like to get rid of the death penalty. I don't have the political capital to do it. Similarly, I would really love to see handguns banned. I would really love to get rid of the gated communities. I think those are pretty terrible. I would like to have abortion be available on demand instead of only in limited circumstances. I would like to see this creationism versus evolution. I'd like to see it much more heavily toward the evolution category. And I can tell you from experience what will happen if I do all of those things at the same time or in quick succession. These patriots and these religious people and these conservatives will start trying to kill me. Seriously, they will. And eventually it'll work. I can put more money into the intelligence services. I can go from high-tech spy service to spy satellites. I would help with the internet crime, apparently. So I could do that, but it's never quite enough. I mean, if you have enough people in your country who want to see you dead, one of them will eventually succeed. So this time I'm trying to be a little more prudent. I'm trying to be less emotionally motivated, and I'm going to try to make changes more gradually, give people a chance to adjust. I'm going to give my recycling, you know, public education, propaganda time to change the character of the populace so that they become maybe a little more receptive to my changes. So in the meantime, I'm going to try to make some less controversial changes that are still pushing things in good directions for me. So, let's see, in the spirit of not being terribly controversial, well, conscription, still not a go with conscription. Let's see, recycling, I quite like recycling. It's not that unpopular, not that bad of a implementation time. I like recycling because it really does help the environment without damaging the GDP. This is one of the things that I keep running into in this game, is that everything I want to do, like, you know, setting pollution controls, according to the game mechanics, it says, well, you can do that and it'll help the environment, but it's going to hurt productivity. And again, we can argue about whether or not that's true, but the game says it's true, so that's what we're working with. This, however, has not really any downside. It'll make the environmentalists more happy, and it will help the environment, and it'll also increase the membership of the environment group. And this is something that I was talking about before. The membership changes depending on what you do. Do you remember the cartoons that they had in the 80s? I think they had Captain Planet in the United States. And in Canada, we also had a cartoon called the Smoggies, where the Sun Tots, which were these, they had this environmentally friendly wind-powered paradise island that these Smoggies kept trying to pollute, and then the Sun Tots would conquer them with the power of love and sunshine. And then there was also the raccoons, were this these happy forest-dwelling raccoons, and they had to fight against the evil industrialist anteater family, who kept trying to turn the forest into a strip mall for profit. So, anyways, I'm again tangent, but I'd like to see recycling up here have all of these positive effects. It's funny, but the conservatives always warn you that if we teach children about recycling and racial tolerance in schools, we're going to brainwash them, and they're going to be this generation of environmentalist, tree-hugging acceptors of people of difference, and frankly, I'm all for it. So, it's a little bit expensive. It's about $9 billion, but you can't put a price on making raccoons happy, I don't think. So let's go to the next turn, and we are misinforming the electorate and buying votes. That's good. Alright, so we still have a small surplus, and the polls are still decent. 46% is pretty good. And freedom of information. I'm sure everybody is familiar with these sorts of laws. Do we want to allow people to have the right to, not have their data collected without their knowledge by insurance companies, private medical companies, and debt collection agencies? Or do we want to give, free rein? So I'm definitely going to enact the Freedom of Information Act. I think it's a good idea. Crime is still going down. That's very exciting. And now we're sitting with 35 political capital. And I'm so tempted. I'm so tempted to just, why do you need machine guns? We have people running around, so they can't have machine guns, but they can have automatics, and they don't need licenses or a minimum age. We just have these people running around, but I don't have enough to change it, so that's just too bad for me. I do think that I'm going to try and get crime headed down a little bit more. This is something that I almost always enact. I think it's fantastic. Community policing. It is... I don't know why it's not popular. People are such jerks. Community policing is just the idea that instead of this bash your head in, Rodney King style sort of police approach, we're going to have, touchy-feely talk to people about what's going on instead of just barging into their house and arresting them. So I think it's a good idea. And in this case, the game mechanics agree with me. It's going to drastically decrease antisocial behavior and alcohol abuse, which are two of our problems. Very exciting. It's going to make the liberals a little happier. It's going to decrease all sorts of nasty things like crime, violent crime, and racial tension. And it's going to increase the number of liberals, which in my case is a good thing because they tend to like my policies more than the conservatives. So it's expensive, and I wish that were not the case. But sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and teach the police how to hug people for justice. One thing that I said I was going to talk about that I haven't talked about yet is the way the ministers work. So the way that you get your political capital, which unfortunately the symbol for political capital is this really creepy, fascist-looking clenched fist symbol. But underneath each person you can see that they contribute different amounts of political capital to my government, depending on their stats. They have loyalty to your regime. They also have a certain amount of experience that goes up over time, and then they have an effectiveness rating. And their effectiveness determines how efficiently they will implement your policy. So, for example, I have this foreign affairs guy, and say I want to organize a trade summit. I want to have talks about free trade with Europe. He will be able to implement the policy more cheaply and more quickly if he's very effective. So you want to have effective people working under you, which seems pretty obvious. And then each person also has sympathies with 2 of the existing voter groups. And then this has effects in 2 directions. So on the one hand, people in these groups will be more happy purely by virtue of having somebody in a position of power who they think understands their concerns. So the motorists, even if I'm, like introducing all sorts of car taxes and actually treating them like shit, they'll be a little bit happier because this guy is here and they feel like he understands their problems. And then it also works, unfortunately, sometimes it works in the other direction. If you make the motorists really unhappy, if you're really working against motorist interests, eventually this guy is his loyalty is going to decrease, and that's going to decrease his effectiveness. And then eventually, if you piss him off enough, you'll get a pop-up message that tells you that he's thinking of resigning. And if a minister resigns, it ends up being really negative for your government. According to the game mechanics, it really decreases your popularity. So you want to avoid that happening if at all possible. So if you get that warning, you either want to fire the individual minister, which doesn't cost as much capital, but it will decrease the loyalty of the remaining ministers because they start to worry that, maybe they should be investigating other careers. You can reshuffle the cabinet, which costs more capital, but allows you to pick new people for every job, and it's not a scandal. It looks like you're just sort of, just sort of reorganizing your strategy or whatever. So I always like to look at my people and see who they're identifying with and see if they're going to be big problems. This guy doesn't like me very much now because when I came into power, I had this legacy of this super conservative regime. But I think over time he'll warm up to me. All right, she's fine. Ooh, Norma Lee. Norma Lee is a religious conservative, and historically they do not tend to like my policies, so I have a feeling that Norma Lee is not going to be my friend for very much longer. But we'll see. So I have to, keep an eye out for Norma Lee. So that's how you get political capital, and we've checked on our problems. I think one more policy maybe. I do want to try and start saving up. There's so many changes that I want to make. Like I want to get rid of the death penalty. I want to regulate handguns, but I just don't have enough political capital for those controversial changes. So I'm going to make a small implementation and then save the rest of the political capital for my next turn so that I have a nice big chunk that I can do something with. Let's see. I wanted to do, free school meals. I was looking at this before. It's popular with voters, and that's always nice to have a boost. And this has some really nice effects. It decreases poverty significantly, which is great, and it also has a nice big boost to health, and health is one of our problems. Also makes various people happy, makes more parents. Can you imagine that decision? Honey, do you think we should have a child? Yes. Yes, because she'll get macaroni and cheese at school for free. So let's do it. Apparently they envision those conversations occurring. So I'm gonna make it just a little bit more affordable and apply those changes. So now we're down to 24, and let's go on to the next turn and see where we are. Our credit rating has been downgraded again. The market giveth and the market taketh away. So, but it's not my fault. Look at this. The global economy is only doing okay. It used to be doing really well. See, I told you it was going to go down. So it's not my fault. It's just the market. Isn't that what politicians always say? So the GDP is going down a little bit because of that, but c'est la vie. Crime is going down. Poverty is going down. I'm still Homer Simpson. Wisdom for the ages. Alright, let's pause here and switch to a new segment for the next section of the video.